Good morning, everybody. Thursday, October 16th, a beautiful morning here in Madison, Wisconsin. So I'm glad you could join us for the October edition of the Beyond the Pail webinar, the WASBO Facilities and Operations webinar. And I'm Mike Berry. I'm the Executive Director of WASBO and a survivor of many major facility projects and school districts over the years. That's what we're going to talk about here. It's just major, major project, big project management. How you approach all of that. So my job this morning is to do the introductory piece and a few program notes, and then I'll turn it over to our co-hosts Jeremiah Johnson and Muskego and Joe Ledvina with the very impressive whiteboard behind him over there in lacrosse. So again, the topic is major project delivery methods, and I think certainly between Joe and Jeremiah and myself, we've been through an awful lot of these. So I think we've got plenty of hard-earned advice to share with everybody. But it's not enough to just to get my perspective and that of Joe and Jeremiah. We really wanted to bring in the industry perspective on this as well. And so to do that, Mike Hacker has joined us today from Cadence Consulting. So whenever WASBO brings in an industry voice like we're doing this morning, I have to do my little disclaimer speech, which is that Mike is here to give the industry perspective, almost like an industry representative. Sitting in that chair today could easily be Performance Services or Nexus or any number of other folks who are in that lane, in that line of work, and that work with school districts. So we don't play favorites and we don't endorse anybody, but we just wanted to get that industry perspective, right? So Mike's been a good sport about that and understands that that's the lane that he's in this morning. So, hey, good morning, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. It's good to be here.
All right. So Jeremiah, Joe, good to see you guys. How you doing this morning?
Great to be here. It's great football weather. As you mentioned earlier, go Bears, but we won't let that distract us from our webinar this morning.
Yeah, I'm watching everybody quit the webinar right now. We're down to like 12 people. Way to go, Joe.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, we're excited to talk about this topic. I think as of late, if you follow the news over the past few years, like facilities referendums have become increasingly more and more. And there's folks that chart this type of thing. And it seems like on the ballot every spring and every fall is a plethora of facilities referendums. Oftentimes that lands in our lap, folks that are managing facilities to work through that. And I've often said it's like a full-time job in itself to try to manage through a project and then still do your job. So Joe, you talked about your little whiteboard in the background. You're living through some of this right now, eh?
Yeah, we're kind of in several different stages right now. We have 3 projects going on right now. We're building a greenhouse, which is a little bit smaller project. So, $250,000, $300,000 project. We just broke ground on an addition at State Road Elementary School, $11 million project there, where we're adding 10 classrooms, gymnasium with 2. And then we're in the process of just about ready to send out the bids for a new elementary school, $42 million. So we're kind of running right now and kind of in 3 stages of construction as we speak. And I know you've been through that before as well.
Yeah, when I started my role in 2013, we had 3 schools that were almost 100 years old and tasked with trying to figure out how to address all of that. And so we passed 2 referendums, one in 2018 and one in 2022. And so I don't think our community has an appetite for anything more, but we've really reconstructed everything. So these projects have been a crazy opportunity to learn a ton about the process and be engaged and really see the whole, district facelift changed. And so I thought it'd be important to have kind of like a third party perspective on projects. And so we invited Mike. He's not necessarily an architect, not necessarily a a construction manager. So what is your role? What do you do in projects like this, Mike?
Sure. Yeah. So as an owner's rep, my role really is to support, clients filling in the gaps, I believe, where they are as they head into projects. So I think you both hit it spot on. Even when you have an abundance of experience, you may not have the time, right? Or if you have the time, maybe you don't have the experience. And I really see the owner's rep role kind of helping plug some balance of the two of those things in every district, on any project type. And so I think Jeremiah, you're spot on. My background is as a licensed architect, so have practiced architecture in the K-12 industry in Wisconsin here for a long time. And through that, obviously, have had the opportunity to experience projects of all sizes and communities of all types. And I think Mike Barry, your lead-in was spot on. That the reality is, Jeremiah, Wisconsin only has a handful of ways that districts can invest for significant value improvements, right? And that really is referendum, right? There are very few other ways that you're positioned to do that. So a lot of what we'll likely talk about are referendum path things, but in the meantime, you as a district still have to tackle other things, big investments for roofs and big investments for Joe, replacing greenhouses and things like that that may not be referendum path. And so my role, I think, is to support districts in whatever kind of method they're going through to make those investments.
There's like a really big trend in Wisconsin around declining enrollment. And that's a national trend. That's not just a Wisconsin thing. And so there are still some pockets of growth, Dane County in particular, but overall it's declining enrollment. So I was thinking, well, that might lead to fewer like new construction type of referenda, but and it's probably true. But what I've been seeing is in addition to just like major capital maintenance to maintain existing buildings, I've seen this new kind of thing sort of popping up, which is the larger school districts especially saying, well, we're going to close schools A and B, and we're going to have to move the kids to C and D, but we're going to have to remodel and expand C and D. It's a lot of those are popping up. So I guess there's always going to be a need, whether it's increasing enrollment or decreasing enrollment, to have a pretty strong capital planning operation.
Yeah, Mike, that's exactly what we're doing right now. We call it right sizing, right? Right sizing our district. And so the addition that we're doing at State Road Elementary will close down another school. And so we're combining schools. And so not only are we upgrading facilities because we have aging facilities too, but we have declining enrollment. So it allows us to right size. So this will be the second school that we're closing. And then building the new school, we're going to be closing two more schools. And so we're upgrading facilities. So construction, you're right, it's going to continue. Even with declining enrollment, things need to be upgraded. And sometimes you gain efficiencies by doing this construction projects.
So I know you're in the thick of it, Joe. I'm just trying to think for those listening that maybe are looking at their capital plan and the needs are 100 million and your budget every year is 500,000. Like at what point do you start to engage with like a construction manager or an architect? Like how do you come to that decision to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so for us, every year we kind of evaluate what are we going to be able to do next year, but we're always kind of looking 2 years out in advance, right? And so on some projects, we'll use the examples that we have. For instance, if you're going to referendum, we bring in the architect before the referendum process, so they can be a part of that budgeting process. They can be part of selling that referendum. So we bring them in there. On other projects, for instance, the greenhouse project, we didn't bring an architect into that project. So depending on what's going on, but as early in the process as possible, whether it's an owner rep or an architect, once we've decided this is the route we're going to go, we get somebody on board.
And one of the things, Jeremiah, that I often recommend to clients is to, if possible, have a master plan, a district-wide master plan that you're functioning within. And you have to update that regularly, but that's everything from, regular annual maintenance that fall under that $500,000 budget you just referenced, but also help you forecast, at what point in the future you're going to need to consider a referendum. Because that process, just going to referendum, that's a year plus, just once you decide you're going to go or going to consider going to referendum, you need plenty of runway to do all your community engagement, build your team, do your surveying, right? Get the board's capacity built, and then obviously position for success. So if you if you don't function under a master plan, you often perpetually feel like you're behind, like you got the cart ahead of the horse. And so I think, Joe, you're spot on where, if you have a strong handle of the state of all of your facilities and know what your enrollment trends are, what your debt capacity is, like all these stars to align, then I think, Jeremiah, you're positioned to, start to figure out what that team needs to look like, what services you need.
There's
That brings up a point. Let me ask all three of you this question.
Okay.
What about a facility? Where's a facility study come into play when you're looking at this long range plan?
Yeah, Joe, let me take the first shot at that. I think because I not all the districts are great at that, and I think there's some reasons why. You have a lot of board turnover. It's not easy to be on a school board these days, right? Every possible social controversy ends up in the lap of the school board, right? Superintendent turnover is substantial, and I think that just interferes. Then there's also something about having hundreds, or in many cases, thousands of kids coming to your school district every day that kind of keeps you focused on, like, can we just get through today? And maybe your long range plan is, can we get through the week? So all those pressures, I think, kind of interfere with the ability to do a lot of long range planning. I certainly saw that when I was in Madison. It was like, are you kidding? We're in a crisis every day. But you do really have to have the three big coordinates of long range enrollment planning, long range financial planning, and long range facility planning. And then you have to have the discipline on your team to be doing that. Maybe it's a once a year report to the board, or maybe it's a twice a year thing on your administrative team agenda, but you got to do it. It's a planning discipline that you need to have. Even if everything's just quiet, you still have to have it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it feels like, for a new superintendent, they come in and they have to hit reset on a new strategic plan as a means of, getting some structure to some guiding principles to kind of guide them. To me, Joe, a facility study is often that for folks that are in your seat, right? I mean, you need some structure in order to know how to prioritize, investments and tackle projects and not be surprised, right? And be proactive. So, I think as Mike was noting, so much turnover from that administrative team, from buildings and grounds to business managers to superintendents, that oftentimes it is a good starting point for somebody new coming in to refresh that and get a baseline. So I see that often as, we see a lot of turnover as well.
There's also the complication that in many cases, unlike Muskego and La Crosse, in many cases, a major school project happens once in a generation. So there's not a lot of built-in experience in a lot of districts, right? So that adds to the barriers, I guess.
Yeah, it really does. That's a good point, Mike. My predecessor, before I got here, he was in my position for 15 years and never was able to do a major building project. So I do think that plays into a lot of the experience with that.
Found a good starting point if you're not engaging with these large companies for your capital plan. If you work with a roofer, even a roofer can help with this, or an engineer. There's plenty of WASBO partners that do this. Like looking at all of your roofs, looking at a timeline of how long each one is going to last you. So if one was installed this year, maybe in 2050, you're going to have to replace that thing, and starting to get that on paper for each of your roof sections. And then maybe you can have your mechanical contractor help you with your boilers, your chillers, and do that same exercise. And then your parking lots, 15 to 20 years, you're probably going to need to do that. You can start to figure out your pinch points for your big ticket items and start to project like, oh, we're going to be in a crisis. In like 4 years, we need to replace $3 million worth of roofs. So it's not like surprise, but also it's strategic. So you can see like, this is how we're going to do it. And if you're meeting with your school board, on a once a year basis, just to share the information and where we're headed towards. Here's what we're looking at. I think that's a good help. We mentioned a little bit earlier about when to engage an architect or construction manager. I kind of found the term construction manager ambiguous because I work on these small projects. Like I need a contractor to come put a door or an opening in. Mike, what's the difference between a construction manager, a general contractor, and a performance contractor? These are all like big terms. And when I was getting into it, I'm like, I don't even know the difference.
Yeah, yeah, no, and that's a great question. One, actually, I spend a lot of time with districts as we talk about how do you build the right team. I really think you have to start by defining what are the needs. What are we trying to accomplish? What type of projects are these? Are they referendum or not? Because Jeremiah, not only are they three different terms in those examples you gave, but there are often firms that do all three of those, right? So it becomes even more complex and messy. So when you at the base, if you think about a general contractor, just like if you were putting an addition on your house or renovating a bathroom, it's somebody that has a certain amount of trades that they do, okay? And swing hammers, demo, right? Install tile in a bathroom, something like that. But then they might not do electricity or plumbing work. So they're going to hire subcontractors to work under them. But to you as an owner, you hire one company and they're responsible for all the subs and they're going to get the work done and they're accountable to you. General contractor, I think you would want to think about that in terms of when you're in the construction phase, the service that is provided. I've been fortunate to work in a number of states around Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, we have really great general contractors, like high skill, high trade, high expectation, and I think that matters when it comes to school district projects, right? They're the pride of having their name on the door, right? On the plaque. Like a lot of our general contractors in Wisconsin, not all of them, a lot of them are family names, multi-generation. Like they do a lot of work for a reason, right? Because of that. Now, Jeremiah, when you start to think about them performing, self-perform work, like erecting steel or doing masonry, you don't need any of that for like that 1.5, 2 year window pre-referendum, right? But we're often talking about having these same firms that early in the process. And a lot of our school projects are really messy, complex projects, right? Multiple phases. We're moving students around the building as we're renovating areas, and they're complex. And so there's value in having a partner pre-construction, even pre-referendum on board to figure out phasing, logistics, figure out what's the right time to bid certain packages, establish budgets, create schedules, right? And that is what would be considered a professional service. And in that is really what a construction manager is, what they do. So most of our GCs are CMs, okay? Like they provide CM services. That's where it gets a little muddy, okay? With that said, not all CMs are GCs, right? Not to confuse it. So some construction managers don't self-perform anything, right? They're not general contractors. They're there just to manage a bunch of subs that are doing everything, okay? So that's where, like one example, Jeremiah, where it gets a little bit messy in the industry of knowing names and who does what, who doesn't do. So like I led with, knowing what you need up front, I think is really, really important because you want to be sure you're asking like apples to apples, all firms for the same types of services and knowing what their role will be as you get further in. Performance services or performance contracting really is often most closely understood when you think about just the definition of the name, how the building will perform, right? And when we talk about performance, it's really energy efficiency, energy performance in a building. We think about automation and building controls. A lot of those vendors at their core are really, really good at, doing mechanical engineering work, big, messy mechanical projects. Now, again, in an industry where everything starts to blend together, a lot of the performance contractors also provide construction management services, also can, certain trades that some of them do, in fact, self-perform. So that's where, Jeremiah, really important to know the difference between those definitions. And then when you're writing an RFP or in search of a partner, are crystal clear in asking how those vendors are going to provide the services you're looking for.
Um, one project that I can help delineate for folks listening is like I did a massive project with a construction manager to build a middle school. And it felt like, a little bit hands off. They were managing budget, they were managing timeline, all the things that you talked about. And then we had a concession stand, and I thought, like, well, I've been doing this a while, I can do this. So I hard bid it. So I work with a architect, created design for the concession stand, and then went to bid for what that was. And we had a winning bidder that was a general contractor. And that relationship was different because they didn't necessarily like own the risk. So I was getting change ordered a lot. It was like, well, your document said this, but this is what it's really taking. So it's going to cost this much more. So I quickly learned the difference between those relationships. One has a little bit more risk and represents you. One is a little bit more like hard and firm. Like this is what you put out to us, and this is what we're going to build. But
Yeah.
we found some things along the way, so it was interesting.
Yeah, and you're spot on. If you take that approach, Jeremiah, and you essentially hard bid it, right? And you accept the low bid, you have to recognize that that firm submitted a number as low as possible to win the work that they thought was representative of doing it. So any change that differs from that, there will be a cost associated. Now, with that said, if you would have had a construction manager on that and it was the same set of drawings, there still will be additional costs, right? But the relationship with the vendor and how you manage those cost increases or scope changes does differ. Like the relationship is different. And so again, I think it's important to know kind of what you're looking for as you head into that.
Nice.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of deciding factors. I can tell you in lacrosse, right, wrong, or indifferent, because we have always done since I've been here, design, bid, build model. We did that with the new elementary school we built. I was heavily involved with that, and then we're doing that with our projects now. And I think what you touched on, Mike, was really important: relationships. Lacrosse is kind of unique from the standpoint we don't have a lot of general contractors, but we have a handful that are very good, right? And so one of the things that we've done is we have a good relationship with them because they do a lot of smaller projects for us. All of them do, because we don't have to go out to bid unless it's over $100,000. That's our board policy, and so those small projects we can do. But I think relationships are so important
Yeah.
with that. One of the things that we've done is too, and I don't want to go off center too much, is we just recently did that. We pre-approved our general contractors.
Mhm.
And so we did a pre-approval process, so we know the contractors very well that we've chosen. And I think that helps with that whole process too.
Yep.
Mike,
Yeah.
Mike and Joe, I also had experience with design bid bill, which is kind of considered kind of an old-fashioned model now.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, and I used to have like really thick brown hair, and the reason I don't anymore is because these projects are so high risk, right? First of all, if you work in a public school district, as you guys all know, you live in a glass house, man. Everybody can see what you're up to, and they've got something to say about it. And on these construction projects, you've gone to referendum already with an estimate, right? To borrow the money. You don't know exactly what it's going to cost
Great.
at that point. So you're working with an estimated cost. You got a hard start date because you can't start the kids in the middle of October, right? You've got so there's for those three reasons, your your visibility, I should say your vulnerability,
Mhm.
your price estimate, and your hard start date. Holy cow. I mean, that is, and then the board's just like every month, are we on budget? Are we on schedule? Are we
Yeah.
on budget? Are we on schedule? There's a lot of pressure there. And then when you do the model of design bid build, where you do lock in, and the good thing about it is, hey, you're getting a competitively bid price.
Yeah.
And no one can argue that there was any nonsense, in how this thing was awarded, right? It's a specific set of documents and the low bidder wins. And at that point, you're in great shape. But then, yeah, the change order parade is likely to start. And what I wanted to ask Mike about is certain players in this scenario, like your attorney representing the school district or the architect, have what's called a fiduciary responsibility to the owner, right? And others don't. like a general contractor. Can you comment on that, or do you just not want to play attorney this morning with us?
No, I never try to play attorney, Mike. Nice try. No, I think it really comes down to risk, right? Ultimately, who's going to carry the risk of ensuring the project stays in budget, right? If you, Joe, you think about that middle school or the elementary school,
Yeah.
$42 million elementary school,
Yeah.
that's $42 million worth of decisions the district has to make. Every
Right.
one of those has a cost impact in some way, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's what color brick goes on the building, how many windows, how many, square footage, every one of those has a cost. So for a 10 to 12 month period of time that you're making all of those decisions, every one of those has a cost impact. Who's at risk to manage that budget, Mike? To look back to the school board to say we're on budget, we're on for a year, we're making all these decisions, and to confidently say we're on budget, whose job is that? And if you do not have a construction manager on board, that really is your architect's role, right? Your architect is going to need to understand that when they enter that contractual agreement with you as a district, that will be on them, Mike, because if they're saying, yep, this is a $42 million project, $42 million project, it comes in at $45 million, who's responsible to redesign that, right? Who guided the district and supported them? Well, ultimately, it is that partner. That is one of the layers that a construction manager brings to that 12-month design process, is that they become responsible. They're accountable to the budget. And every time there's a new set of drawings, it's their job to provide an update of that budget. Okay, are we still on track? Picking brick A versus brick B, they'll have real industry dollars to those decisions as you're making it, right, along the way. And if it bids over budget, it's ultimately their job to bring back strategies and approaches to bring the project back into budget. So, I think, Mike, I think really important to, I think clearly, I think identify, Jeremiah, as we talked earlier, you think about that as a professional service pre-referendum. That's what the service they're providing professionally is, to support you in making value judgment decisions from a design standpoint throughout, to ensure that you're managing that budget. Um, in that, I think transparency is critical, right? And making sure that the district establishes expectations for exactly how this process will play out if you have a CM on board, meaning the level of detail in the budgets, the frequency of those budgets, certainly bid day transparency, like when bids come in, if you hard bid it, Joe, like you're going to do, you're going to
Mhm.
get 4 envelopes from those 4 pre-qualified vendors. They're going to have one number at the bottom, maybe a couple alternates, and it's very, very clean, right?
Yep.
The construction manager is going to bring you back 30 bid packages with 5 bids in each bid package with a range and a recommendation. It's far more complex, but that, as long as you have that transparency built in, you as a district are investing in someone to guide you through that process, to kind of look at that granular level of detail. A lot of value, if it's just from an owner's rep standpoint, a lot of value in you having that transparency, you being in a position to make those decisions alongside that partner. A lot of times, Wisconsin has not only, great general contractors, but really great local subcontractors, right?
Yeah.
Electricians,
Mhm.
plumbers, folks that all by themselves don't crisscross the state, right? But if you have a vendor in, ideally you would work with local partners as much as possible. That's one of the benefits I think a construction manager might bring, is that they're not just going to hard bid it and have to take whoever's low, which is often going to be a big entity that covers a big part of the state. A CM may be able to support you in identifying local partners, finding ways to structure bid packages to encourage them to bid on it. And I've seen a lot of success in tracking and in that as well, Mike. So again, I do greatly see value in design, bid, build as a clean, clear, low is low. And then Jeremiah, you have to have budget contingency for change orders. It's the same as with the
Yeah.
CM. You just have to be prepared for that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would,
If
I
I were
think,
to advise a young, school district team, or, some folks who
yeah.
haven't done this a lot, I would say two things. One, you really need to pick up the phone and talk to like a Joe Ledvina or a Jeremiah Johnson, or dozens of others who've done a lot of this work, because you'll learn a ton.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
the second thing, and this is me speaking from having done a lot of these, is you've got to get a good construction attorney on board very early to explain the array of choices on delivery method to you and to your board and to your superintendent. I'm going to do a friendly amendment. Joe said relationships matter, and I totally agree with that. I want to add that contracts matter even more.
Yep.
And having a well-written contract between you and your architect, you and your general, or like you and your construction manager, or you and your owner's rep, depending on exactly how you want to arrange this. All that time on the front end, that tedious and expensive legal time, can save your backside, because things will and do go wrong. Even in the best projects with the best teams, I had projects with the biggest and best architect firms, and the biggest and best builders in the state. But weather came in, and winter weather just decimated the schedule. Critical shortages on steel or what have you. Things do happen. And then it's going to be like, all right, who's cleaning up the mess on this one? And is it on the owner? Is it on the CM? Is it on the contractor? That's where the contract documents come in to play, and you got to have them.
Yeah.
So this is not something to just kind of go, hands in your pocket, whistling along, let's go see what happens. If you're going to do these kind of projects where the board and the superintendent's reputation is on the line, you got to do your homework.
And
Yeah.
I'll just say from the private sector, I think those vendors, they want good contracts as well with districts, right? I think that the basis of really good relationships professionally are clearly understood responsibilities, clearly understood kind of contractual roles. And so I think, Mike, just so you know, even if it's a little bit of uncomfortable dialogue, like we're all Wisconsin nice and don't want to hurt feelings and stuff, we got to get through some of that contract stuff, because as soon as we have that behind us, then you start to build a relationship successfully on top of that. So yeah, I would echo that for sure.
Right.
And I
Yeah,
just-
I mean, we're all good friends until there's a $3 or $4 million change order.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden everyone retreats to their corner.
No.
So
I could tell some stories
yeah.
about that too, actually.
Go
So,
ahead, Joe.
no, but I just want to add what Mike did. He did a great job of presenting that. And we kind of touched on it at the beginning. Not everybody needs to do it in-house. We need owners reps and construction managers. When you look at what we're asked to do more and more, our facilities managers are really busy. And so number one, you have to have time to commit to that, right?
Right.
And then you have to have the support system within your school district to be doing that. Everywhere from the business office to everyone, these projects take up a huge amount of time. And so there are opportunities. There's times when you need an owner's rep, when you need a construction manager. We've not done that on these projects, but we've been fortunate. I have a team beside me of managers that can do other things. But if you couldn't do that, there's no way we'd be able to do that.
Yeah.
And,
I think, Joe,
and we talked to them along the way as well.
and as I led with, I think really important, if you do consider an owner's rep, to be clear with them, what level of support do you feel like you need
Yeah.
from an owner's rep? And that's kind of a vulnerable conversation. Like, what do we know? What don't we know? Or where do we have time? Where don't we have time? And for some projects, it's start to finish, full service in every meeting, speaking on behalf of the client, very, very engaged. I have other clients where I'm introduced at the start of the project and I'm not present. I'm behind the scenes. I answer questions. I review contract language. I review invoices, and it's a more passive role, just in support of the district to ensure or provide some additional level of insurance that we're making good decisions, or we've crossed our T's and dotted our I's. And it really, Joe, there is no one size fits all. There are core services by definition, right? Things we do by definition, but the reality is, to do it really well, I believe you have to, be open to try to figure out, what would that look like if you had somebody in support of the district. And I would say it is with the superintendent, it is with the business manager, it is with the facility team. And, the conversations might differ, right? We're talking school board engagement and providing updates with the superintendent to the school board. Business managers, we're talking about budget management and invoice approvals. facilities, we're talking about, what type of roofing to go on and, how do we get multiple bids for certain categories? And so really the role needs to align with, the leadership within the district as well.
Is there any project that you would consider too small for an owner's rep or a construction manager?
So quick answer is no. Like, there's not like a magical dollar threshold that you go through. The amount of effort certainly changes. I will say some of the, it's easier, I'll say just professionally, private sector side, it's easier to scale up often than it is to scale down, right? So it's easier to build a team, add services, hire consultants to do large, complex projects. It's often more difficult to scale back that team to do really small projects. And so if there is a really small project, I think you would want to talk to your construction manager if they ask if they have a special projects team, or, if there's a vendor, maybe a superintendent or a tradesperson on that team you worked with before that you could specifically work with on that smaller project, just to get the one-on-one, kind of hands-on level. But the quick answer is, no, I think it's really just a matter of being sure you're clear about what you want to get out of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Nice.
I've
We've been
had,
talking a lot about high level contractual stuff. I was hoping to get in the weeds just a little bit for the facility folks that are like, how do I fit into this? So once you've made the choice to engage a construction manager, an architect, and you're now, the wheels are turning and you're starting to go to bid or whatever the case may be, what is the facility manager's role? And I ask this because I've talked to folks that are like in the driver's seat. I'm thinking, Joe, you're probably that driver. And others that the superintendent is in the driver's seat. Like, is there like a common approach? And I say that because I felt like my involvement has been just such a great opportunity, and to be at the table has been a blessing to me. And like, I just couldn't imagine watching that happen in the fringe. Like, what are we seeing as like a common thread, or what suggestions would we make to our colleagues?
I'll lead, Joe, and then feel free to jump in. In my experience, if it is a referendum project, Jeremiah, with lots of layers, it is designed by committee, right? I mean, you have to make decisions as a leadership team because every decision is going to impact, staffing level. It's interesting. I had a conversation with the superintendent just the other day that was recognizing that even though we're talking about architecture, we're spending way more time talking about like HR issues and energy consumption issues and things that aren't architecture, right? We're saying, why can these two classrooms not go next to each other? It's because these two staff members don't work well next to each other, right? We're like, other things are emerging out of that. And so it's interesting how often like so many layers of the district weave into that, Jeremiah. So I think it's important to have a clearly defined committee, right? Whether you call it a core team or a core planning team or something that as a group is recognized that we're making decisions as a committee, right? We're going to all carry this because at the end, the architect is ribbon cutting, architect's done, contractor's going to move on, right? Warranties close out, and you as a district have to live in that building, and those HR things don't go away. Joe, in your role, the management, maintenance, update of that building doesn't go away. So if it's always, every time we have an issue, it was the superintendent's decision, which is why we have this issue, or, I wasn't asked my opinion, so now it's just my problem. No one wants that either, right? So we have to really be sure I think you build a strong committee.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And in right now, what we're doing, in fact, today, I'll go to we call it our long range planning committee, but it's really working on our referendum projects that we're doing right now. And it's the superintendent, it's the business manager. So we have a whole group of us who meet every Thursday and we talk exactly through, we started this when we started the whole process of going to referendum through the design process. Nobody, I can tell you, I do not want all that responsibility on me, right? So we have a committee that does that. It was designated long before the referendum. We've worked through it and we're continuing to meet through this whole process of construction. And we don't get into the nitty gritty, but when there's decisions that need to be made, everyone who's at the table that needs to be.
Yeah. Well, I will say I've been fortunate in my career to work with folks like Jeremiah. And there's a reason, Jeremiah, you learned a lot in that process because you ask a lot of great questions and you challenge things, and we're not going to move forward until we all agree and are comfortable. And you all are entering a world that you're not in every day. You're hearing a lot of acronyms and processes and things that you're maybe not familiar with. I really encourage you to be sure you don't end meetings, you don't take steps into the next phases until you are fully comfortable with where we're at and what decisions we've made, what responsibilities we still have as we go forward. As an owner's rep, that's I believe one of my roles is just watching body language in those meetings. So Joe, when you go to that long range planning meeting, my role is not to speak on your behalf, but to watch for the moment you hesitate to answer a question, because there's likely a reason you hesitated, right? There's likely something we should talk about offline or some research we should do or something, so that you're confident in making those decisions. And so I think, Jeremiah, as your question for folks that might be listening, ask questions. You have these resources in the room, folks that do this every day. Make sure that you fully are comfortable, so that the next referendum you do, right, you're building on everything you've learned in this process going forward.
Yeah,
Mike, I like what you
put a
just
pitch
said.
here for the facility directors. I realize that there are different teams, maybe pre-construction and post-construction. Like your curriculum people might be very involved pre-construction, but they kind of drop off after that, which is fine. But I think that the developmental um, um, bonus that you get from involving your facility director, when they after all have to operate the building, um, it accelerates their learning. I think sometimes these administrative teams are used to not having the facility director in the room because they're talking about, school management issues, and they forget, like when you're going to do facility work, you better get the facility director in, and it pays off in a lot of ways to have that person involved throughout, especially during construction. And I'll say one other thing against well, my WASBO colleagues will hate me for this, but we sometimes have to guard against superintendents who kind of want to dabble in architecture land, right? And sometimes business managers who want to dabble, right? They've got their own little design ideas. And everyone's got to pick their lane. So spending some time before you do anything with is understanding roles and responsibilities of your planning team.
Mike, if I could add it right there, because something you just said and what Mike said earlier, he said it very, very briefly, but it was really important. And that was when he says, when he notices a hesitation from like a facilities person, he goes and talks to them afterwards. Because there's a lot of those discussions that you want to have without the superintendent or the business manager, because the facilities person gives you a different perspective of what you're dealing with. And I think that was really important what Mike said on that.
Yeah.
I would say to balance on the other side for my superintendent and business manager friends. Sometimes us facilities folks can get in the weeds a little too much and complicate a meeting that's got a real good flow to it. And then we start talking about like what style garbage can we're going to use because this doesn't work well. And you end up down a half-hour rabbit hole. So I love all perspectives. Like, let's make this a team decision. So when we opened the building, it was a good team effort, and not belittle the facilities manager that wants a better roof. Because oftentimes when we're making cuts to the project, it's like the things that we want are getting gutted, and that's painful. So let me ask that question. How do we handle when you're in the nitty-gritty of a project, you're engaged, and all of a sudden you're $1 million short? And what are you going after in those times? Like, how are you cutting back, and where are things that we should be looking at as potential cuts, knowing that everything's unique?
I approach these projects with clients trying to frame that question, Jeremiah, around the notion that budgeting is really just like a financial version of prioritization of this investment. Really, right? If you think about, you have this much money to spend on this new building or this renovation, how are we going to spend it? You think about the decisions you make up front, it's almost like an inverse V. It's like a V, right? It's like an inverse funnel where the critical decisions up front are usually big decisions, square footage, quantities of things, right? That are going to have the biggest cost impacts. And then over the course of these design meetings, that funnel gets narrower and narrower, and the decisions become more granular, right, Jeremiah? So to your kind of bridging your prior comment, if we're in our first meetings talking about garbage cans, right, we're misaligned. But at the end of the process, we need to be talking about those garbage cans and knowing what those goals are, right? And so, um, but if we are proportionately at the end of the project and we have to find $1 million, and we're looking at a whole bunch of little things, those nice garbage cans are the first thing that are going to go, right? I mean, that's going to be the low-hanging fruit where you're thinking about prioritization. If we know up front we have to make some big decisions, we need to start with those to
Yeah.
make sure that all along the way that we're kind of guiding that. But in that prioritization, just like anything else, it is about having guiding principles, right? That's where leadership matters, to be honest, like superintendents, business managers, facility directors.
Mhm.
You're gathering so many opinions, and every decision you will be under the spotlight for, right? That ribbon cutting, the first time people walk through that building, it's either going to be way too nice or, you spend how much on this building, right? It's tough to get that porridge the right temperature. And
Yeah.
all of those decisions are on your core leadership team, right? And so, Jeremiah, having guiding principles to say, okay, we made these decisions for these reasons, right? And every tough moment we had, we ran back through that filter. How does this achieve these goals? And if not having that garbage can doesn't achieve this goal, well, in that case, maybe we have to make that decision. But at least you can always go back to that as your filter.
Mike, if I can, yeah, I think first of all, hopefully if we've done this right, we've built enough reserves and contingencies into our budget that we're not stuck with that problem. But I'm sure you've gone through this in different roles where you don't want to be making these critical decisions under pressure after bid, right? So, you know, it's I think when an owner rep is able to say at the front end, look, let's come up with a list of about a dozen ad alternates in case we're rolling in the dough,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
let's come up with a dozen deduct alternates
Yep.
ahead of time. Have you ever gone kind of through that process so that the decisions are kind of pre-cooked?
I'm a huge advocate of bid alternates. And so those that aren't familiar, a bid alternate would essentially be a list of things that you could either add to the project or, Mike, as a deduct, take out of the project if you have some budget swing on bid day, right? And those might be, in some cases, niceties, meaning like you really want, Joe, you have a favorite carpet you put in everywhere, but it's a premium. You're going to pay more for it. So you either bid that as the base, and then you have a deduct alternate to a cheaper carpet, right? So on bid day, if you're over, that's an option to step back, or vice versa. You go with the cheaper carpet, and if you have extra money, you have it as an ad alternate. And there's many, many, many things. In some projects, Mike, it's really a calculation of the risk on bid day you feel you have, right? So if you
Yeah.
think you've pushed the envelope and you've used every dollar, but you maybe didn't get as far as you wanted, and you think you're going to be in a tough spot, bid alternates are a really keen strategy because what you're able to do is get through bid day, you're over budget, you accept some deducts, you're on budget, you can go to the board and you're on budget. You go to the community, you have a project on budget, right?
Right.
Um,
That seems very confidence inducing as opposed to
Yes.
holy hell, the bids came in over.
yep,
Yes.
The board can smell fear.
yep, yep,
Right.
yeah.
So having those choices, like you were just saying, I think is very helpful.
Yeah, and that's where, owner's rep, a construction manager is great at this as well. There are certain decisions that are forever decisions, right? That if you don't accept this, it'll never go into the building. It can't maybe. Other decisions you can add over time. Joe, you're gonna have to replace that carpet in 10
Mhm.
years, 15 years. Well, at that point, then you put in the nicer carpet, you just start budgeting for it. And
Right.
and so there are ways that you can still work towards those visions and goals, even if you can't get them in on bid day. But I think, Mike, you're spot on. It's I think a really sound tool or strategy to manage the budget when you're coming down the line and getting ready for bid day.
Yeah, if I could just use an example, when we just started the project, the 10 classroom edition project, we had 5 alternates. And we felt comfortable with our bid, so I think it's really important what you said is knowing that what your budget is, do you feel comfortable with it? But we were able to provide all 5 alternates. And that's why we put them there. So we knew in advance what we would like to see if the project came a little bit under.
And I think in those examples, Joe, for that 1 year of design, everything is just an estimate.
Yep.
Until bid day, you have an actual number. So,
Yeah.
you don't really know. You have a ballpark of what you think it's going to cost, but that you actually know what it costs on bid day. So it's a great way to test the market and get real values for what a lot of these decisions really look like.
And one of the things that we've done with alternates, and when we couldn't do them, then I have a real strong number for capital improvements, and maybe I fund it through the capital improvement process.
Yeah. And just keep in mind, not every bid alternate has to be accepted on bid day, right? There are some bid alternates you can wait
Yes.
halfway through construction, see if you have contingency still left, and then make that decision. That's again where having a partner or having a team to support you and how do we position ourselves to best leverage this investment. Again, Wisconsin, we don't have many opportunities, so you pass a referendum, you want to extend it as much as possible and get as much as you can for it. So I would recommend keeping that in mind as well.
Yeah, I was gonna add to this for my architect friends that are on. I've gone through this process. There are some things that are really tough to change mid-cycle. So like if you're like, oh, we can shave a few inches off of the hallways in this building, it might save a lot because there's a lot of material in that building throughout the entire stretch. However, it does put the stress on the architect to then have to redesign all of the piping, all of the materials that go through. So some things like you talked about the carpeting, maybe any type of flooring, those things are a little negotiable. Some things are not. Like you can't redesign a building for a chiller halfway through the bid project. So I was going to say, Mr. Beckman, All-Star, left a comment down there that I thought was kind of compelling. So let's just say you had $100 million budget and you've got past the bid process and you want to keep a contingency. Of that 100 million going into a project, what million or what percentage would we keep for a contingency for surprises, bad soils, bad weather, embargoes, union strikes? Who knows what can happen? Anything will happen to you. What would you keep as a contingency?
Yeah, so I would say industry standard, just face value, you would hear 5 to 7% of that would be the recommendation. Now, to me, I think it's a little more nuanced than that. Not every project's the same, right? If you think about a contingency, it's a tool to manage your risk. And not every project is as risky as another. Joe, building a brand new elementary school on a greenfield site somewhere where the soils are good, you have a good set of drawings, there should be a ton of surprises. Very different than renovating a high school from the 1960s to be a like new building. That's all surprises, right? And so two different scales there, Jeremiah. So I would say contingency, when you think about change orders or things that come up, there are really three reasons that those things happen, right? Either there is a legitimate surprise, meaning we open a wall and we find some pipes, or we hit bad soils, something nobody could have known, right? That takes up usually the majority of contingency draws are those things. As much as we want to say we have a perfect set of drawings, they're not. This is a custom design for the district. It's not a prototype that we're copying, repeating everywhere, right? So not everything has been fully coordinated. Not every product is known when the drawings go together. And so things do change, right? So drawing discrepancies is a second. But then the third one is owner directed changes, right? And generally those are things that you as a district say, oh, we want to add a door here, or we want to add another window here. Usually enhancements to the project, right? But that contingency is your money, right? That is the district's dollars that if it, I believe firmly, needs to leverage that to improve the project, you should be able to do so. So I think, Jeremiah, we often hear change orders as kind of this bad term, this bad reference. Contractually, all it is how we document a change in the cost. That's all it is, right? And change orders can come down, change orders certainly can go up, but generally that 5%, right, is kind of the working understanding. So 5 to 7 as for folks that are leaving this conversation, heading into a project would be what generally you would be recommended to hold.
For new, right? I would, Mike, I was thinking of Madison School District is renovating 4 high schools at the same time.
Yep.
Two were built before World War I.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
two were built in the early 60s. Over 3 summers, because I got to work around the kids.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go into that with less than 12%.
Yeah.
Right? Wouldn't you?
Yeah. No, so
It's scary.
in
Scary
cases
stuff.
like that, you'd start with a 5 to 7 as a base, and then you build other
Oh,
risk factors
yeah,
like
exactly.
abatement risk factors, and so you start to stack on top of that, Mike. So yeah, you're spot on. There are, during design, you'll have contingency. So Jeremiah, you just asked about it relative to construction, right?
Mhm.
But during design, your CM may recommend holding a contingency for the evolution of the design. You may have an estimating contingency, right? Especially over the past couple of years as we've seen big swings in costs for materials, right? So to me, a contingency is a really smart tool as long as you're leveraging it and tracking it over the course of the project.
Nice. Well, hey guys, we're kind of coming up on the hour here. This probably could have been an 8-hour pod on all of the things that we could potentially cover. We really did hope that as the facilities folks or whoever joined us that they got some nuggets that maybe are outside of their vocabulary, or how we can be an integral part of all these projects. So Mike, we really appreciate your work on this. Joe, you are living it right now, my friend. So hang in there. And
Yeah.
I think overall, as Mike started with, there are so many partners across the state that can help us through these type of projects. There's amazing contractors, amazing performance contractors, amazing architects, and they all want our business. And so please tap on your resources, tap on those folks that support WASBO. We're blessed to have a lot of folks that help us out, and be a part of those projects. Like, you will forever be able to drive past that school with your kids and grandkids and say, look what I helped achieve. It is a really cool thing to be a part of. So any other concluding thoughts?
I have one concluding thought, which is if you have a colleague that's going through this process, um, send them you go to Costco, you get the giant Excedrin for like $20, because a
Mike,
lot of headaches, but like you said, Jeremiah, this is legacy stuff. You don't get to do it twice. You want to do it right. Joe, what did you put up in front of the screen there? I couldn't see it.
Pepto-Bismol.
Ah,
That's
all
for a
right.
different set of problems.
Well, and Excedrin. That's what you need to do school construction.
Hey,
folks.
Right.
it's a tough job, but it couldn't be any more rewarding, right? To be a facilities director when exciting things are happening. Mike, you did a great job. I learned a lot from you today, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you
Yeah,
for having
thanks a
me.
lot, Mike.
I think next month we'll be talking about cleaning, staffing hours, cleaning checklists, all types of things staffing. So we're gonna hard switch from salt and now construction onto more facility staffing type stuff. So if you've been enjoying this, we're really happy that you're joining us, and we look forward to talking to you guys next time.